It's Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're in the Inland Empire today. We are joined by Mike Hestrin. He is the district attorney for Riverside County. So I'd like to speak with you about the death penalty and throw some numbers at you, if I may. I know we're lawyers, so numbers aren't part of our lexicon, but let's give it a shot. So Riverside has 6% of California's population,
right?
But last year, 57% of the death sentences. It has 0.71% of the U.S. population, but 15% of the death sentences. Those are the numbers.
Yes.
What do you got to say?
Well, you got to look at the overall numbers.
Please.
We had 8 death sentences last year, which, if you go back and look over the years, that's on the higher end even for us.
Right.
So, you go back and look for the last 5 or 6 years, and we've had, sometimes 4, sometimes 5, as high as 8.
Sure.
But I don't remember it ever being as high as 8. So a lot of that is just sort of the luck of the draw for the year.
Right.
But the larger issue, the larger point, we're a pro-death penalty county, and our prosecutors are aggressive.
But what's interesting is, you say that we're a pro-death penalty county. When I think about Riverside, I guess the death penalty does cut in a lot of different ways in terms of the political spectrum.
Right.
But I perceive Riverside County to be fairly moderate.
Right.
I don't know if so much on the death penalty, but it's not a far right-wing county.
No.
And so it's interesting that these numbers are where they are. And look, like you said, only eight death sentences, but that was 8 out of 14 for the entire state.
Right.
And then 8 out of 49 for the entire nation. So you get inflated proportions.
Sure.
So when you say we're a pro-death penalty county, what does that mean?
Okay, so, go back to, remember Prop 34, the previous effort to try to get rid of the death penalty.
Right.
It went down, I think, 52-48.
Right, yes.
In Riverside County, it was opposed by the voters at 60%.
Oh, okay. No,
Okay,
that's
so,
fair.
So Riverside County has shown that they support the death penalty. The other thing I would say, Brad, is that, remember those 8 death sentences, the jury decides.
Right, that's true.
So these are Riverside citizens that come into the courtroom, they hear the evidence,
right,
and they're giving death verdicts.
And again, I don't know the facts of the 8 cases. You may. I'm sure you do.
They were heinous.
Yeah, and again, like you said, any year can bring on numbers just based upon, how that year looks. But I think a point's important to make that in 2012, Riverside had 5% of the nation's death penalties.
Right.
In 2013, 8%. 2014, 4%. When Riverside County's 0.7%. So there is something there.
Right.
But is it the juries? I don't think it's a high crime county, is it?
We have high crime, but I wouldn't say that we're way out of whack.
We're not the murder capital of the nation by any stretch.
No, I think it's more to the point that the population supports the death penalty, and that is reflected in their elected officials.
What's interesting, though, is despite our views, my views, that Riverside's a moderate county or not, or pro-death penalty or not, a lot of states, even the reddest of states, are abolishing the death penalty. In May 2015, Nebraska, couldn't get any redder than Nebraska, was the 19th state to abolish the death penalty.
Yeah.
The 7th since 2007. Republican governors are eliminating the death penalty. So the countervailing winds are just that, they're countervailing. What do you see on the landscape?
I think that there's strong support across California for the death penalty. Go back again to Prop 34, the initiative to abolish the death penalty in 2012. The proponents of Prop 34 spent more than $7 million, most of it out of state. And the opponents, basically the elected district attorneys, spent less than $500,000.
Right.
And still the voters upheld the death penalty.
But I do want to get a sense from you as kind of a student of the system.
Sure.
Why is it that this blue state, California, seems to be in favor of the death penalty when the reddest of red states, Nebraska, it seems like a cognitive dissonance.
So I think it's much more complicated than red and blue. And
Fair.
this is what
Very fair.
I would say. Death penalty is a hard issue, and I prosecuted 7 death penalty cases.
Yourself,
Myself.
Before you were DA,
Yes.
you were the man, the individual that asked the jury for the death sentence.
Yes. And it's a difficult thing. I believe in the death penalty, but I'm also not someone who is a flag waver for it. I think it should be used rarely. my policies reflect that.
So let's talk though about the death penalty,
Yeah.
because as we speak today, there is a chance that at least one person, I believe that person out of Texas, was executed. His name was Carlos de Luna. You may know this case. And this evidence suggests that he probably was innocent. And
I'm not familiar with the case.
And
yeah.
fair enough. And fair enough. But we are, again, I'm just playing both sides, but death is permanent.
Yeah, it is.
And so is this something that we want to met out?
It is, and let me tell you why.
Please.
When you have a case where a police officer is gunned down at point blank range, executed, when he's on his knees, that case screams out for the death penalty. When you have a case where you have someone who rapes and brutalizes a family and then murders the entire family, when you say, as a society, when we say, well, life in prison is what that person's going to get, it's not justice.
But, well, let me ask you, though, what is more painful? Rotting in prison for the rest of your life or dying?
Well, obviously that's going to be up to the individual, but I think as a society, here's why I favor the death penalty. As a society, we must have the ability to express that ultimate punishment for that very rare case. And remember, we seek the death penalty in California in 2% of all murder cases. 2%.
So what type of case? I mean, you gave us a few examples.
Right.
Police executions,
Yes.
rapes, murders.
Well, I can tell you my cases were
please.
cases where you had young people or elderly people, vulnerable victims that were basically slaughtered. I prosecuted a case of Ryan Bonaminio, Riverside police officer, that was gunned down.
Right.
These are heinous cases: rape, torture, murder.
Right. We spoke about Prop 34, 2012,
Yes.
to eliminate the death penalty. It did go down. In 2016,
Yes.
this November, we're likely to see two initiatives on the ballot.
Yes.
One would convert all death sentences to life without parole. No more death penalty.
Right.
Another would, I guess the focus would be to reform the death penalty appellate process and other
Right.
processes to speed up the sentence, because you may remember there was a federal court ruling out of Orange County. Judge Cormac Carney said the death penalty is really life in prison with the remote possibility of death.
Right.
So
Yeah.
talk to us about those two competing initiatives.
So there's no question our system in California is terribly broken, our death penalty system. So right now, when a jury hands down a death verdict, and we haven't executed anybody in many years, but they can expect to wait 30 years until that sentence would be executed.
If at all.
If at all.
And many die before the 30
Right.
years is up.
They're dying of natural causes. One of the main problems is that there are so many built-in delays in the system.
Right.
And let me give you an example, a concrete example that the
Please.
initiative, which I support, by the way, would fix.
The reform initiative.
The reform initiative. I support the initiative to reform the death penalty. When we have someone that's given a death sentence, they typically go 5 to 7 years after the death sentence without having a lawyer assigned to them. An appellate lawyer will not be assigned to them for 5 to 7
seems
years.
silly.
Right? Someone who's got a death sentence hanging over them, they need a lawyer right away. And so one of the things that the initiative would do, the reform initiative, would be to mandate that a lawyer be appointed right away, and it also expands the pool of eligible defense attorneys. And so those are two very needed reforms.
I'd love for you to come back and let's talk more about these two initiatives,
Okay.
because I really do think it's critical that our viewers, the voters of California, understand what's before them. And I'm
Right.
sure you can give us some insight into that. His name is Mike Hestrin. He is the district attorney for Riverside County. I'm in the Inland Empire today. I'm Brad Pomerance, Charter Local Edition.